Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. This is Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, DAB and online. Today we'll be discussing Mickey Mouse degrees with the Universities Minister and an Imperial victory for Brexiteers. But first, it's the news with Olivia Guthrie.
Darren, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The government is investigating what UK police say was the worst violence seen at a European football match. Sports Minister Nigel Huddleston says clashes between football fans and French police at the Champions League final last night are concerning and upsetting. UEFA say thousands of fans tried to enter the grounds with fake tickets. But Liverpool defender Andy Robertson has criticised the police handling of the event, saying a ticket he gave one of his friends didn't work, despite being bought through the club. The Reds lost 1-0 to Real Madrid at the Stade de France. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defence says the Royal Air Force and the Navy will be protecting fans at the Qatar World Cup. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says British personnel will join forces with their Qatari counterparts to tackle terrorism and other threats to the tournament. The FIFA World Cup in the country is due to start on November the 21st. President Joe Biden and his wife Jill are in Texas today to pay their respects to the families of those killed in Tuesday's mass school shooting. 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered by a gunman at Robb Elementary in the town of Uvalde. It's the 3rd mass shooting in the US in the last few weeks. Vice President Kamala Harris says the country should have the courage to take action.
We are not sitting around waiting to figure out what the solution looks like. You know, we're not looking for a vaccine. We know what works on this. It includes, let's have an assault weapons ban. You know what an assault weapon is? You know how an assault weapon was designed? It was designed for a specific purpose, to kill a lot of human beings quickly.
In Ukraine, their military say the forces are continuing to resist Russia's assault in the east of the country. It's after an overnight missile strike destroyed part of a solar power plant as Moscow's attacks intensify. Ukrainian officials say Severodonetsk, the largest city they still hold in the Luhansk region of the Donbass, was weathering heavy artillery barrages today. It comes as Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky says Russian assaults in the surrounding areas are becoming worse. The Labour Party here is to push for a vote on the Prime Minister's decision to change the ministerial code of conduct. Critics say Boris Johnson's proposals water down the rules, but the Cabinet Office says it's disproportionate for ministers to lose their job for what they say are minor breaches. The changes mean MPs will instead face a salaried suspension or will need to issue a public apology. Environmental campaigners have deflated the tyres of 20 4x4 cars in Edinburgh as part of their campaign to deter people from driving the vehicles in cities. The group has been deflating the tyres of SUVs across the UK, with one member estimating they've slashed around 4,000 this year. A spokesperson for Edinburgh Tyre Extinguishers says 4x4s are unnecessary and massive killer vehicles. But Police Scotland have called their actions reckless and are urging drivers to check their tyres before driving. Boris Johnson wants to bring back pounds, ounces, feet and inches. The government's going to launch a consultation on the use of imperial measurements in Britain to coincide with the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, reportedly. The UK has used metric units since 2000 following an EU directive. Traders are currently legally required to use metric measurements for sale by weight or the measure of fresh produce. Well, as the UK prepares to celebrate Her Majesty's Jubilee, the Prime Minister says no monarch has served the country so well. In a personal message to the Queen, Boris Johnson thanked her for her exemplary service, praising the institution of the Crown and the exceptional individual who wears it. The PM also described the Queen as a steadying, guiding force for the nation, adding Her Majesty embodied the very idea of what a constitutional monarchy should be. And tributes have poured in for the legendary jockey Lester Pigott, who's died aged 86.
Never Say Die was that 18-year-old marvel of the saddle, Lester Pigott.
The 11-time champion and winner of 30 classics was widely regarded as one of the greatest riders of all time. Fellow jockey Frankie Dettori said Lester was a hero of his, and the impact he made in racing is second to none. The chief executive of Great British Racing, Rod Street, added, Lester was a true titan of sport, a one-off who transcended horse racing. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Darren.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Let's have a look at what's coming up on the show. Do you still talk about the miles you've driven rather than kilometres, or measure flour in ounces and not grams? Well, a decade after the EU all but outlawed traditional measurements, they're making a comeback thanks to Brexit. So why are some lefties so upset? We'll find out. And the Universities Minister joins me to explain why her government is investigating Mickey Mouse degrees and what they're actually doing to protect free speech on campus. But are they doing enough? I'll be asking her the difficult questions. And should the UK do more to help the Uyghurs who face persecution and even genocide at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party? A new trove of hacked police photos has actually shed light on Beijing's brutality. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. As always, though, your thoughts are much more important than my own. What do you think about Imperial measurements return? Tweet me at GBNews or email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online on YouTube, and don't forget Facebook. Loads of brilliant content on our GB News page. Cheers very much. Now, some have asked why we even bothered to vote to leave the EU in the first place, right? Why put ourselves through the torment of arduous, never-ending negotiations with the Brussels conglomerate over abstract concepts like freedom, sovereignty and control? To me, they are fundamental, important principles for any truly democratic and free nation state. But Euroscepticism, right? Wasn't some concept dreamt up over a polling day on June 23rd, 2016? It actually goes back much further than that, before I was even put on this planet. It's an idea brought about thanks to a constant drip of European federalism, actually stripping away the Union Jack varnish of what many felt were the very foundations of what it means to be British, of British life and our national identity. For those, like myself, under 40, the British imperial system included ounces, pounds, yards, miles, feet. Some of those you're no doubt naturally going to be familiar with. The imperial system actually stretches all the way back to 1824, standard across the British Empire by 1826. So it was no small thing to actually criminalise its use. That was back in 2000 when the British government adopted an EU directive in UK law that meant traders must display metric units or face criminal charges. That played a massive role in exposing the influence that Brussels bureaucrats had over British decision-making, over everyday life here in Britain. And it was actually Sunderland that would force the issue into the national conversation when the Sunderland grocer, Stephen Thorburn, had his imperial weighing scales seized by undercover trading standards officers. Mr. Thorburn was a patriot, giving his customers what they were used to and, frankly, what they wanted. They wanted a pound of bananas. They were used to shopping in such measures. It strikes me as obvious. In 2016, do you remember that image of the night It was the woman in Sunderland, proud as punch, who was being hoisted up into the air as jubilant voters and vote leave activists were punching the air with glee. And if you're asking me, it's a real shame, actually, that Mr Thorburn wasn't around to see it happen. He, sadly, died suddenly in 2004 at the age of 39. His daughter now fights for a royal pardon. He spent 3 years going through courts with the case and a criminal conviction for not converting to metric measurements. Utterly insane. He ought to receive a royal pardon. An ordinary market trader who's now being completely vindicated by our vote for Brexit. We can actually achieve the things that he actually campaigned heart and soul for back in 2000 to 2004. So while some in the media, right, are sneering and laughing at the odd, quirky British campaign to bring back pounds and ounces and the crown stamp upon a pint glass, I think it's part of our identity. It's part of our history. It's part of our culture. And I welcome, I really, really do, I welcome the return by Boris Johnson's government. If you ask me, this is the most incredible comeback since Elton John's hair transplant, right? In a week when we all rightly celebrate our selfless and longest-serving monarch for the Platinum Jubilee, it's right that we give a nod to the tradition, the history, and the values of our great nation. Cheers, Boris. Now, as discussed in my opening words there, imperial measurements are coming back after being outlawed by the EU's measurement directives over a decade ago. My next guests have long campaigned for the change and led one of the most significant pro-Brexit movements, Grassroots Out, during the referendum campaign. So joining me now is Peter Bone, the Conservative MP for Wellingborough. Peter, you heard what I had to say there. Now, many have argued that the metric martyrs, like Stephen Thorburn, actually paved the way to our vote for Brexit. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, Darren. I think I can go now because you said it all in your introduction. It was spot on. I didn't disagree with a single word of it. And the fact is, we are now in the position to get rid of outdated EU laws, and we've started to do it. And this is a small part of it. I mean, my compulsory motor insurance bill, which is now an Act of Parliament, saved £50 a year off our insurance premiums because it was an outdated EU law that needed to be changed. And this is a similar thing with the imperial measurements. Why should anyone be forced to sell something in a weighing scales that he doesn't agree with or she doesn't agree with? And of course, our biggest trading partner, the USA, of course, also had to have the imperial system, even though they tweak it here and there with their gallons not being the same as our gallons.
Mm. Yeah, do you actually, are you concerned about the fact, Peter, right, that this seems a pretty easy Brexit win, but actually it's taken half a decade?
Well, I think the problem we've had since Boris came to power and we got Brexit done, about 48 hours later we had COVID, and that changed everything. And for those 2 years, it was concentrate quite rightly on solving this terrible pandemic. But now that's in the past. And by the way, part of the reason it's in the past is because we had the freedom to get the first vaccination in the world. It's gone to billions and billions of people and saved countless lives. That wouldn't have happened if we'd been in the EU. So that was the first huge Brexit dividend. But now we've got Jacob Rees-Mogg looking at all these silly EU laws to see which ones we can get rid of.
So, Peter, then, do you actually think Boris Johnson should crack on with a royal pardon for the metric martyrs? I mean, Steve Thorburn actually, sadly passed away at 39, so he's no longer with us. But his daughter is very much campaigning to see her dad receive a royal pardon. Would you like to see that happen?
Absolutely. At the time, I thought it was absolutely dreadful. And I think it came in, I think Labour brought it in under Blair, but it outrageous. And yeah, of course, why not? It should never have happened. Some of us think in pounds, some of us think in kilos, some of us think in both. But, if we drive down the road, it's miles per hour. And I reckon that one of the reasons we've got litres rather than gallons is because it looks as though the price of of petrol and diesel isn't as high. Imagine what the price would be if they put it in gallons these days. No, that's crap. And a pardon for somebody who fought against the nonsense seems to me a lot of sense.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Now, I don't wish to bring about blue-on-blue action, Peter, on the Lord's Day, but Alicia Kearns, the MP for Rutland and Menton, she said that not one constituent ever has asked for this. She said it isn't a Brexit freedom. She actually said, Peter, it's a nonsense. What do you think of that?
Well, I guess she hasn't knocked on too many doors in her constituency.
Well, there we are. But I mean, if she did knock on doors in her constituency, one argument that you've been making, Peter, is that people are absolutely sick to their back teeth of hearing about Boris Johnson being handed some Tupperware during a so-called party. Do you actually think, is this an attempt to distract the public? Or do you think, Peter, that people are just so sick of talking about Partygate now that they'll welcome talking about anything other than that nonsense?
Well, I know that my constituents many months ago passed on for this nonsense about Partygate. They want the Prime Minister to deal with important matters. They want him to deal with the war in Europe. They want him to deal with the economy. They want to stop the small boats coming across illegally from France. And of course, he's going to move on and do other things. And this switching back to the option of selling stuff in imperial measurements is a small but sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
But we've got to take these advantages now coming out of Europe. Jacob Rees-Mogg's got to get down to it, and let's get rid of all these unnecessary regulations that affect businesses in this country.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about Jacob Rees-Mogg, obviously the Minister for Brexit Opportunities, it's no small brief. There are loads of things that we should be exploiting. But Peter, I don't know about you, but when I campaigned for Brexit, I had a vision, I imagined that the UK could do a lot better than what we're currently doing, which is a really quite high-tax economy. And I think we're sending out entirely the wrong message to international investors who want to create jobs and opportunities here in Britain. Do you think the Chancellor needs to actually start to, I think, look again at what Brexit breakthroughs could actually be brought about?
Well, I accept the economy, of course, has been hit by the COVID pandemic and the war in Europe, and that's clear. But I don't think the solutions not the Prime Minister, but the Chancellor is going for is right, because he wants to put up higher taxes, he puts higher taxes up and then gives some of it back to certain groups. That's not the right way. We should be going for a low tax economy. We should be cutting taxes, not rising them. We shouldn't be picking this person or that person to get a rebate. Now, I was on the record of calling him these policies socialist. I think they are, and I think they need to be reversed. I don't think the Prime Minister is. I think the Prime Minister would rather not do what the Chancellor and Treasury are coming forward. I think it's the wrong way. And I'm right. I don't think it sends a good message out to the rest of the world, and we need to reverse that. If we want to win the next general election, we have to reverse it.
Absolutely. I mean, Rishi Sunak's starting to look like the most successful socialist chancellor this century, Peter. But I wonder, to end, if you would, what are you doing for Jubilee weekend then? Can you fill us all in?
Well, we've got a big central parade in Northampton, but locally, about 100 yards from where I'm at the moment, we have a church service and we have a coffee morning, and that's what we should be doing. And look, the monarch has just been amazing, the Queen, and I can say truthfully that in all the thousands and thousands and thousands of doors I've knocked on, not a single person has ever said anything bad about the Queen. Now, that's some achievement from a monarch, and we are far better for having our Queen.
Absolutely. It speaks volumes, doesn't it, to the strength of that institution under Her Majesty the Queen. But Peter Bourne, the Conservative MP for Wellingborough, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Now, folks, there's plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. Next, we're going to be debating Nicola Sturgeon. She's Scotland's longest-serving First Minister. But what has she actually achieved? First up, though, let's have a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking showery at first, although with showers fading away to leave clear spells. Let's take a look at those details. For Devon and Cornwall, a mixture of showers and sunny spells. The showers will still be on the heavy side at first, but will die away through the evening. For London, the evening is looking largely dry with some sunny spells, although the risk of a few showers remains. For Cardiff and South Wales, a few showers are likely this evening, but for many it will be dry with some sunny spells. It's a similar story across Birmingham and the Midlands, where the evening promises to give a scattering of mainly light showers with variable amounts of cloud and some sunny spells. A cloudier picture across parts of north-east England this evening, with a few spots of rain and some bright or sunny spells, feeling cool along the east coast with wind off the sea. Rather cloudy at times for Edinburgh and southern Scotland, with a few showery outbreaks, but also with bright or sunny spells. Feeling cool, especially towards the east or under thicker cloud. And for Northern Ireland, the evening will see a familiar mix of sunny spells and a few scattered light showers, perhaps a touch breezy along the north coast. A dry night for most away from Scotland, cloudier in the north and turning chilly in the south under clear skies. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick.
Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, folks, Nicola Sturgeon has become Scotland's longest-serving First Minister this week, with 7 years and 187 days in office under our belt. Sturgeon has now outlasted all of our predecessors, including, of course, former friend and one-time mentor, Alex Salmond. So, to discuss her legacy, joining me is the former Tory MSP, Brian Monteith, former SNP councillor for Glasgow City Austin Sheridan, and the Conservative MSP for South Scotland, Craig Hoy. Austin, can I start with you, please? What do you actually think Nicola Sturgeon has to actually stand up and say, I'm actually proud of what I've delivered for Scotland?
Yeah, I think if you look at things like the baby box, which we've delivered, which will help new parents, I think that's been good. I think increasing the number of free childcare to help support parents, doubling the Scottish Children's Payment, putting money in people's pockets during times of need. I think it's the social policies that I'm most proud of that Nicola Sturgeon has managed to achieve.
So, Craig, that sounds pretty impressive to me. What have you Scottish Tories been doing? Nicky Sturgeon sounds like she's really, really onto something there.
I think, Darren, the only achievements of the First Minister are winning elections. If you look at everything else in Scotland, schools, hospitals, roads, railways, ferries, jobs, the tax system, it's a litany of failures. And what Nicola Sturgeon has successfully managed to do is to fight elections here in Scotland on the question of the Constitution. But actually, if you look at what Alex Salmond, her predecessor, said last week, he said that her delivery is awful and that she was using the Constitution as, and I quote, a political shield in order to hide from her record in office. So I think when you look back at the 7.5 years that Nicola Sturgeon has governed Scotland, on all the key indicators, education, health, and take Scotland's drugs death crisis, for example, it is absolutely shocking. So, I mean, you can point to the baby boxes perhaps as one small policy innovation, but on those big asks, those big tasks, the SNP has singularly failed, not just for the last 7.5 years, but for the last 15 years.
Brian, do you think Scotland is fundamentally less free thanks to Nicola Sturgeon's 7.5 years in office?
Well, I think the evidence shows that Scotland has been less free. Certainly during the COVID pandemic, the lockdowns were longer, the restrictions were larger, and there's no other way of measuring it that Scotland was locked up by Sturgeon far more than England was by Boris Johnson. But that's not going to be our legacy. Our legacy is going to be that she made education her priority, and clearly that priority has now been abandoned. Trying to ensure our schools would be improved is a target that no longer is given the importance it was. And that, I think, when we look back at measuring what has been achieved in power, will be the biggest nail in her coffin.
OK, Austin, you mentioned there how Nicola Sturgeon has a record to be proud of, but it can't be that good of a record, can it, given that you actually left the SNP?
No, I'm actually a member of the SNP, Darren. I'm still a member of the SNP. I did leave the SNP previously in order to fight for a pro-independence majority in the Scottish Parliament. That is true. But then I have since returned my membership. In terms of everything that has just been said there, especially when it comes to the lockdown, what we have to remember, it was only a year ago that Nicola Sturgeon won re-election as Scotland's First Minister, got the highest number of votes that any party leader has managed to achieve and got the highest percentage. And that was during Nicola Sturgeon's response to the COVID pandemic. So clearly the people of Scotland had confidence in Nicola Sturgeon's approach.
Do you think they've got confidence over the ferry scandal?
There's definitely issues to be sorted out there. I mean, and Nicola Sturgeon doesn't shy away from that either. I mean, of course there are issues that have to be sorted out, and I hope that Nicola Sturgeon will be prompt and will be quick at getting those issues sorted out. Every government has issues, but overall, the Scottish public do have confidence. It was only a matter of weeks ago the SNP achieved their best ever local government election results.
Okay.
After being in government since 2007, a remarkable achievement.
So, Craig, Austin's right there, isn't he? I mean, Boris Johnson's certainly got his problems, hasn't he?
I think if you look at the situation here in Scotland, I mean, look at Nicola Sturgeon. She's been in office for 7.5 years, and you cannot point to a single major achievement. Only 3 weeks ago, they nationalised the railways here in Scotland, and the first thing that happened after that is a third of services were slashed. In fact, my local station near me here in Dunbar, there is not a single ScotRail service now from that station. It's almost as if everything Nicola Sturgeon touches turns to dust. And I think Brian was absolutely right in relation to the COVID crisis. If you look at what the UK government managed to do, we managed to get the vaccine programme developed and rolled out in all 4 constituent parts of the UK. Meanwhile, Nicola Sturgeon would have had us behind the queue in Europe waiting for the European vaccine. Across the board, she makes the wrong call, and I absolutely agree with Alex Salmond that on these fundamentals, she's hiding from the electorate, and that's why she continues to talk about the Constitution, because it's the only thing she has to offer. It's the only red meat she has to offer to the SNP supporters, because if they were to look at her record on trains, on roads, schools and hospitals, it's pretty disastrous.
Brian Monteith, I wonder if you can set out briefly, if you would, what actually Nicola Sturgeon's legacy tells us about what an independent Scotland would actually look like.
Well, actually, it's very difficult to know, other than the record of disaster that Craig mentioned earlier. what it would bring. I'm coming to the conclusion that Nicola Sturgeon's really not interested in independence. She's certainly not interested in running Scotland well, given what's happened in drugs and education and
well,
housing.
Brian, I think Austin would agree with you. I think Austin would agree.
The likelihood is that all she's really interested in is maintaining power for her and her coterie. And the way she does this is essentially dividing and ruling against the unionists. But the good news is that we can look at the results and see that, in fact, what has happened is that many of the parties have got together and held their noses and supported each other so that they can remove the SNP from running the council. So despite the SNP having a good result, they've seen councils taken away from their control because unionists are at last getting their act together and saying, we have to support being anti-SNP. And that is encouraging for the future of Scotland.
And Austin, fundamentally, the British people, the Scottish people even, there aren't opinion polls showing that there is an overall majority in support of Scottish independence. Isn't it time to start focusing on the healthcare issues, on the education issues? Really, really important.
You don't have to do one and not do the other. At the end of the day, the people of Scotland elected the largest for independence majority of parliament that we've seen since 1999. The people of Scotland voted for MSPs on the promise of delivery of a referendum. We're all Democrats here, so we should respect the democratic decision of the Scottish people and allow them to make a choice. But I find it really interesting about how our Conservative members here continually talk about the constitutional matter when during a local council election campaign, the Tory leaflets were saying, let's stop the SNP, stop independence. Local councils are not going to decide the constitutional future of our country.
OK, I'll let Craig briefly come back to that.
Got defeated.
That's frankly bizarre. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon was going up and down the breadth of Scotland in a bus that had Boris Johnson on the side of it in the local council elections. She clearly wanted to fight the recent local elections here in Scotland on anything other than the SNP's record in local government. The streets of Glasgow are absolutely filthy. There's record council tax around the country. They have hollowed out councils across Scotland, and they're about to embark on a national care service that is a huge power grab on Scotland's councils. Nicola Sturgeon cannot fight any election on the record of her party in relation to major and fundamental public policy and public services because she's failed. And that's why she, and not us, continually retreats to the issue of the Constitution, because the only way she remains in office is by dividing Scotland, by pouring salt into wounds, and by keeping that independence dream alive, despite the fact that an opinion poll last week said that only 35% of Scots want another independence referendum next year. But that's something she's spending a huge amount of time and a lot of taxpayers' money in planning for.
Well, brilliant. Well, we'll agree to disagree, won't we? Brian Monteith there, and the former SNP councillor for Glasgow City, Austin Sheridan, and the Conservative MSP for South Scotland, Craig Hoy. Thank you very much for your time, gents.
Thank you,
now, folks, you're with GB News on telly and DAB radio. Next, we're going to be discussing Mickey Mouse degrees with the Minister of State for Universities. But first, it's time for a check on the news headlines with Olivia Guthrie.
Darren, thank you. It's 2:33. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The government is investigating what UK police say was the worst violence seen at a European football match. Sports Minister Nigel Huddleston says clashes between football fans and French police at the Champions League final last night are concerning and upsetting. Liverpool defender Andy Robertson has also criticised the police handling of the event, saying he had friends involved in the incident. The Reds lost 1-0 to Real Madrid at the Stade de France. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defence says the Royal Air Force and the Navy will be protecting fans at the Qatar World Cup. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says British personnel will join forces with their Qatari counterparts to tackle terrorism and other threats to the tournament. The FIFA World Cup in the country is due to start on November the 21st. President Joe Biden and his wife Jill are in Texas today to pay their respects to the families of those killed in Tuesday's mass school shooting. 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered by a gunman at Robb Elementary in the town of Uvalde. It's the 3rd mass shooting in the US in the last few weeks. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky has visited troops on the front lines in the northeast of the country today. The visit marks his first official appearance outside of the Kyiv region since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February. Ukraine's military say their forces are continuing to resist Russia's assault on the east of the country. Officials say Severodonetsk, the largest city they still hold in the Donbass, was weathering heavy artillery barrages today. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Darren will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. Now, 8 universities, folks, are under investigation for reportedly giving students poor quality degrees. The university minister has been leading the charge to improve those standards and actually deliver better outcomes for students. So the Minister of State for Universities, I'm delighted to say, Michelle Donnellan, joins me now. Michelle, thank you very much for your company.
Good afternoon, Darren. Nice to be here.
Now, the Telegraph are reporting, they're claiming today that Warwick University is decolonising courses in an effort to win a charity award from a Advance HE. But you've actually warned universities against this kind of whackery and wokery, haven't you?
Yeah, indeed. Of course, we have universities are autonomous in our system, which is fantastic. But actually, they're spending a great deal of taxpayers' money, and we need to be sure that that is spent effectively and efficiently. And on this very issue, what I don't want to see happen is academics actually told by bureaucrats how to teach and what to teach, because that's not right. And I think what you're referring to is the affiliation with an organisation called Advanced HE, which is something I've spoken out against and warned universities, has the chief executive of the regulator, the Office for Students, because we need to ensure that nothing really impinges upon free speech and academic freedom as well.
Yeah, it strikes me that the £9,000 that students, over £9,000 that students are paying, actually, they're just, if you ask me, they're ideological factories of churning out people who leave university somewhere to the left of Chairman Mao. But actually, they're not getting the rewards from the expensive degrees, which would be employment and actually a useful degree at the end of it. Some kids are just suited to other outcomes. And that's a good thing, right? More people in apprenticeships even. We're not seeing that, though. We're seeing more and more kids go through university and they're not right for it. I wasn't right for it, Michelle, right? So why are we not having that discussion? Why do you think there is this drive to push people through university at that massive cost?
Well, first of all, I'd say let's not talk our universities down. We've got 4 out of the world's top 10 universities. We're one of the greatest countries in the world to study in university. But there are some fantastic alternatives, as you point out, apprenticeships, further education. And that's why this government is investing in those alternatives. But we're certainly not obsessed, like the opposition is, the Labour Party, in terms of how many students are getting to university. It's not about that. It's about how many are completing if they go on to university and how many are then going on to get graduate jobs at the end of the day. That's one of the key reasons why people go to university, and we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that. And that's why I've got a relentless focus on quality, so that we can really tackle some of the courses, and it is too many, which are in effect dead-end courses. They don't lead people onto graduate jobs. In fact, completion rates are not even high enough. This is something that this government is committed to tackling. That's why we have now launched investigations working with the regulator. It's why I've asked every university to be fully transparent, so that when a student picks a university, they know, well, what are my chances of getting a graduate job? Am I likely to be able to complete if I do this course? It's why we've relaunched something called TEF, which is a labelling system, and in fact, smacking on a requires improvement, so that it is a fully transparent system. And it's also why I was determined to work with the regulator to ensure that we have thresholds. For the first time ever, universities will have to reach certain percentages of numbers going on to graduate jobs and numbers completing courses.
Yeah, I mean, it all sounds good, but Michelle, tell us about this new legislation that seeks to protect freedom of speech on campus, because on this show we've chronicled week in, week out the assault on freedom of expression on campus, where you can't talk about issues, whether that be net zero, you might have a different view to the Prime Minister, certainly, or on the issue of self-identification of your gender, you might actually have a different view to the activists on that issue. How will this bill actually tackle the chilling culture of activists on campus?
Yeah, and it's right, Darren, that you have spoke today about quality, but also now moving on to free speech, because the two are intrinsically linked. If we can't have freedom of expression and free speech amongst our students and our academics on campuses, how are we ever going to create the next generation of innovators, the next generation who will go on and develop and create and move society forward? And we have seen some horrific examples in some of our campuses. If we take, for example, Kathleen Stock and others over the last few years, I think it is undeniable that there is a problem. Yes, we have an A rating for academic freedom in this country. It's not the case that we have a problem across the board in every university, but we do have an issue. There are too many examples of free speech being curtailed. This bill will create a new director who will sit at the regulator, who will be responsible and hold universities to account on this issue and be able to fine them, not just for matters of protecting free speech, but also a failure to promote free speech. So this really will change the culture on our campuses and stamp out this cancel culture that we've seen growing over the last decade in particular.
Your colleague, the Attorney General, Suella Braverman, she has been quite vocal over recent days about her views on issues around the debate. I remember her saying very eloquently that when she was put on maternity leave, and of course you and your colleagues voted through changes, actually the whole House did, voted through changes to the maternity bill to ensure that the Attorney General, as a woman of course, could actually take maternity leave. But she was really, really puzzled, Michelle, by attempts to remove the word woman from a pregnancy. Now, it strikes me, Michelle, that women are the ones who carry children. Novel idea, I know.
Well, of course they are, yeah. I mean, that's slightly an aside issue from freedom of speech on our campuses, but you are right. Women biologically carry children. We do have to have a bit of common sense.
Debates that you can't have on university these days, right? That is how bad it is getting on campus. As I say, we have people week in, week out saying to me on this show, I'm really scared to actually speak up on campus and say something as fundamental as only a biological woman can carry a child.
Well, and quite right, Darren, that's why we're dealing with it. That's what I've heard similar cases directly from students and also academics, and that's why I'm committed to bringing forward the legislation that will tackle it. We will be resuming in a matter of weeks in the Commons to ensure that our campuses aren't just places where freedom of speech is protected, but actively promoted and encouraged. And that is what this government is doing, honouring its manifesto and tackling this problem head on, which previous governments have avoided.
Yeah, well, on that issue, going back to universities and this particular debate around sex and gender, which is becoming increasingly toxic, I think. But how many of these universities are actually members of Stonewall's diversity champion scheme, which strikes me as an abuse, frankly, of taxpayer cash? And is this actually skewing how the debate around women's rights and gender and the tension there is actually playing out on campus?
Well, look, as I said at the beginning, universities are autonomous. They are free in legislation to make these kind of decisions around affiliation of organisations and membership groups. But I do think they need to think really hard about how that money is spent and whether that will have any ramifications for limiting free speech and what that says to their students and the broader public as well. And of course, as you say, a great deal of their money is taxpayer funded.
What would you actually say to anyone watching this show today whose kids are coming up to university age, who might think, well, I certainly don't want my children to go to university. I'm really worried about everything that we've just been discussing, Michelle. Would you actually advocate that they do think about other options, or are you still unapologetically standing up for British universities and how they're world leading?
So I personally am always standing up for the individual and what's in their best interest. That's at the heart of my politics. That's why I want to put them in the driving seat of their own education. That might be going to university. We are one of the very best countries in the world to go to university. That is undeniable. And we have some issues that this government is tackling head on. But we're also a country which is home to some amazing apprenticeships, a fantastic further education service. We need to get away with this obsession of one size fits all and that the state knows best in terms of people's future. In fact, I believe in people and I back their ability to make a choice. And that's why we want to ensure that when they make that choice, all of those options are high quality and that they lead them to where they want to go, which is fundamental.
So what do you say then to the parents watching who might well be thinking, well, I've just been reading in the paper about how loads of these courses are being held remotely, where students aren't even receiving tutorials in person. Actually, they're spending over $9,000 to not be taught in person. Do you actually encourage these lecturers and universities to get back to proper in-classroom teaching?
I absolutely do. And this is something that I've been very vocal on because students deserve better. They're paying £9,250. They're investing a lot of time. And we know poll after poll shows that they want that pre-pandemic type of learning. I've been actively calling up universities that haven't been doing that. The OFS, the regulator, will start investigating those that haven't been doing that. But it is important to say it's now a stubborn minority. We've been working with the sector to get it down to a stubborn minority. But students deserve better than what they're seeing from some of those that are reluctant to get back to pre-pandemic teaching.
A very clear message for universities there. I think my viewers will agree. Minister of State for Universities, Michelle Donnellan, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks.
Now, it's 2:48 and it's time for my Scrap Reform Keep segment. An extensive data leak from Chinese police computer networks has shed new light, pretty horrific light, on Beijing's mass detention centres in Xinjiang and the oppression and even genocide faced by China's minorities. It's one of the worst crimes in modern history, and it made me think, should Britain be doing more? Let's put our relationship with China through Scrap Reform Keep. Joining me to discuss this very issue is the director of Uyghur World Congress and Stop Uyghur Genocide, Rahima Mahmood. Rahima, thank you very much for your time today. What have the police leaks actually revealed? Because they're pretty horrific reading, aren't they?
Thank you for having me. Yes, up until now, the photographic evidence of the genocide, I will call, has been limited to drone footage and satellite images, and also some leaked documents and survivors' accounts, etc. But now we have these thousands of pictures of individual Uyghurs that have been detained behind. Each of these photos has its story, trauma, and life destroyed. And we know the youngest detainee is just a 15-year-old girl. And this is inhumanity at its most extreme.
Is this genocide?
Of course, this is genocide. The independent tribunal, the Uyghur Tribunal, led by Sir Geoffrey Nice QC, concluded this is a genocide, crime against humanity.
Yeah, so if we consider then the segment of scrap, reform, or indeed keep, do you think that actually we should reform our relationship with China? Is that what you would actually like to see happen as a way in which the United Kingdom can send a strong message through to China saying that the international community simply won't stand for this?
Absolutely. So the British government have not matched their harsh words of condemnation with action. And the US is leading on this with the End Uyghur Forced Labour Prevention Act and in recognizing this as genocide. And the UK needed to catch up, and this government needed to sever all connections to the genocide in my homeland. I believe through tackling forced labour in British supply chains, that's the number one thing, and ripping surveillance tech used in the concentration camps, and like Hikvision out of public bodies and government departments, and also sanction officials, blacklist entities carrying out or profiting from these atrocities. Blacklist those individuals and officials, and acknowledge that the Uyghurs are facing genocide, and UK government acting on their responsibility as a result.
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be difficult and it's not going to be cheap, but I think we do fundamentally need to reform our relationship with China, especially post-pandemic and post the leaks that we've actually seen, damning stuff. Thank you very much for your time, though. That was the director of Uyghur World Congress and Stop Uyghur Genocide, Rahima Mahmood. Thank you for your time today. Now, folks, it's time for Campus Clash. And today we're asking our student participants, is the Conservative Party still, in fact, conservative? Joining me to discuss from the University of Newcastle is Adam Wilde-Smith and chairman of the Aldershot Young Conservatives and student at the University of Reading, Steed Bennett. Steed, can I start with you then? Are you proud to call yourself a young Conservative? Do you reckon they are still conservative?
Absolutely, Darren. Absolutely. We are still conservative. I don't think anything has really changed from, back when we were in the 80s and the 70s and in the 2010s with David Cameron to now. So, yeah, I think we are very much still conservative.
Adam, what do you reckon?
I don't think the party can be described as very conservative at the minute. If you look at some of the actions they've taken, increase in taxes through the freezing of the tax rates, that national insurance rise, they can hardly be described as conservative actions at the moment. If you look at Ian Duncan-Smith in The Observer this morning, writing that the party is suffering an enormous identity problem because of the increasing of tax rates. And then if you look at that £400 grant for every household in the nation, yes, I think a lot of people would agree that many households need support at the moment. But as the Sunday Times reported this morning, there's some villages, there's one in Windermere, for example, where 85% of homes are second homes. I don't think if you own a second home, you need £400 off your energy bill. So I don't think many of the actions the government are taking at the minute can be described as conservative.
So, Steve, how would you respond to that then? Because, for example, I wouldn't argue that the online harms bill is particularly conservative. That's actually going to curtail speech online, and I'm really worried about it. Does the party actually stand up for conserving anything these days?
Well, I think all those points are valid. I think if we look at the windfall tax and the taxation, for example, we're in a situation at the moment that's unprecedented. We haven't seen anything like it for a very long time. And, we had George Osborne, who did a windfall tax in 2008. We had Margaret Thatcher, who used windfall tax twice on high streets and then oil companies. So this isn't Conservatives have used windfall taxes in history more than Labour have. So this isn't a thing that Conservatives changing and being unconservative. We've done this for a while. It's unprecedented times. This is what we're doing. As far as the internet bill goes, I don't agree with it. I think we have to be more in terms of free speech. I think we heard Michelle earlier talking about free speech on university campuses and things of that nature. And I think the government is doing all they can currently. I think we have got one or two issues that are slightly larger going on, but as much as they possibly can at the moment to deal with those issues.
So, Adam, is Steve not right there that we're in unprecedented times? We've just come through a pandemic, and of course, Europe is at war. So should we not be a little bit more relaxed about the Conservative Party perhaps taking its foot off the gas, so to speak?
I don't think so. I noticed in reference there to the windfall tax that yes, the Conservatives might have used it more, but if the Conservatives go on to introduce a tax on electricity, as has been poised, then the windfall tax was actually be larger than both the Thatcher and the Osborne windfall taxes combined, certainly in line with that of New Labour. And I think it must be also important to note about the sort of moral question in terms of the Conservatives at the moment. Does Johnson sort of possess that moral authority that's needed to lead? And I don't think he does. I think if you look at even The Spectator this week and their lead an article, they say it's a damning and accurate charge against the Prime Minister that he's no man of principle. So I think the Conservatives at the moment can be described as probably conservative in name only.
Yeah, well, Steve disagrees with you there, but Adam, I actually agree with every word, and that won't make you very popular on Campus Mind. But that was the students, Adam Wilde-Smith and Steve Bennett. Thank you very much for your time, lads. Now, you have been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Stay with us, though, of course, for the other half of the show. But first, folks, here's the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking showery at first, although with showers fading away to leave clear spells. Let's take a look at those details. For Devon and Cornwall, a mixture of showers and sunny spells. The showers will still be on the heavy side at first, but will die away through the evening. For London, the evening is looking largely dry with some sunny spells, although the risk of a few showers remains. For Cardiff and South Wales, a few showers are likely this evening, but for many it will be dry with some sunny spells. It's a similar story across Birmingham and the Midlands, where the evening promises to give a scattering of mainly light showers with variable amounts of cloud and some sunny spells. A cloudier picture across parts of north-east England this evening, with a few spots of rain and some bright or sunny spells. Feeling cool along the east coast with wind off the sea. Rather cloudy at times for Edinburgh and southern Scotland, with a few showery outbreaks, but also with bright or sunny spells. Feeling cool, especially towards the east or under thicker cloud. And for Northern Ireland, the evening will see a familiar mix of sunny spells and a few scattered light showers, perhaps a touch breezy along the north coast. A dry night for most away from Scotland, cloudier in the north and turning chilly in the south under clear skies. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GBNews,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes, on telly, DAB and online. In this next hour, we'll be discussing the potential record immigration that the UK is going to see this year. Why isn't the rest of the media actually willing to talk about it? But first, folks, here's the news with Olivia Guthrie.
Darren, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. The government is investigating what UK police say was the worst violence seen at a European football match. Sports Minister Nigel Huddleston says clashes between football fans and French police at the Champions League final last night are concerning and upsetting. UEFA say thousands of fans tried to enter the grounds with fake tickets. Liverpool defender Andy Robertson has criticised the police handling of the event. Earlier bulletins on GB News were showing incorrect pictures for this story, for which we would like to apologise. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defence says the Royal Air Force and the Navy will be protecting fans at the Qatar World Cup. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says British personnel will join forces with their Qatari counterparts to tackle terrorism and other threats to the tournament. The FIFA World Cup is in the country, due to start on November the 21st. President Joe Biden and his wife Jill are in Texas today to pay their respects to the families of those killed in Tuesday's mass school shooting. 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered by a gunman at Robb Elementary in the town of Uvalde. It's the 3rd mass shooting in the US in the last few weeks. Vice President Kamala Harris says the country should have the courage to take action.
We are not sitting around waiting to figure out what the solution looks like. You know, we're not looking for a vaccine. We know what works on this. It includes, let's have an assault weapons ban. You know what an assault weapon is? You know how an assault weapon was designed? It was designed for a specific purpose: to kill a lot of human beings quickly.
Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky has visited troops on the front lines in the northeast of the country today. The visit masks his first official appearance outside of the Kyiv region since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February. Ukraine's military say their forces are continuing to resist Russia's assault in the east of the country. Officials say Severodonetsk, the largest city they still hold in the Donbass, was weathering heavy artillery barrages today. Environmental campaigners have deflated the tyres of 20 4x4 cars in Edinburgh as part of their campaign to deter people from driving the vehicles in the city. The group has been deflating the tyres of SUVs across the UK, with one member estimating they've slashed around 4,000 this year. A spokesperson for Edinburgh Tyre Extinguishers says 4x4s are unnecessary and massive killer vehicles. But Police Scotland have called their actions reckless and urged drivers to check their tyres before driving. The Labour Party is to push for a vote on the Prime Minister's decision to change the Ministerial Code of Conduct. Critics say Boris Johnson's proposals water down the rules, but the Cabinet Office says it's disproportionate for ministers to lose their job for what they say are minor breaches. The changes mean MPs will instead face a salary suspension or will need to issue a public apology. As the UK prepares to celebrate Her Majesty's Jubilee, the Prime Minister says no monarch has served the country so well. In a personal message to the Queen, Boris Johnson thanked her for her exemplary service, praising the institution of the crown and the exceptional individual who wears it. The Prime Minister also described the Queen as a steadying, guiding force for the nation, adding Her Majesty embodied the very idea of what a constitutional monarchy should be. Tributes have poured in for legendary jockey Lester Pigott, who's died aged 86.
Never Say Die was that 18-year-old marvel of the saddle, Lester Pigott.
The 11-time champion and winner of 30 classics was widely regarded as one of the greatest riders of all time. Fellow jockey Frankie Dettori said Lester was a hero of his, and the impact he made in racing is second to none. Willie Carson, who shared the saddle with Pigott in the 70s and 80s, says, "I feel as though I have lost part of my life in a way." This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Darren.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up over this next hour. First up, mass immigration is back. Under Boris, 830,000 people, that's on student visas, that's on working visas and family reunions, were allowed into the UK in just one single year. That's taken back control, folks, is it? Net migration hasn't yet been calculated, but there's a good chance that this is going to be the highest ever year for net migration to the United Kingdom. Now, folks, and perhaps not unconnected, the Tories are losing support, with latest polls showing that they'll lose the Red Wall and key southern seats. But what groups are turning on them and why? I'll speak to an expert. And used cars are rocketing in price and car thefts are surging. How much could your motor be worth and how can you get a new one? We'll bring you the latest. That's what we're talking about for the next hour, but as always, I would absolutely love to know your thoughts, much more important than my own. What do you make of rising immigration? Tweet me at GBNews, or you can email me your views on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online on YouTube, and don't forget Facebook, loads of brilliant content on there with lots of you asking, how are we going to house all of these people? Cheers very much. So, as I rightly say, immigration is up 145%. Where's everyone going to go? In a year, that's 1 year, one single year, with the number of visas and permits granted in the last 12 months absolutely surging. The Home Office have said that this week, more than 1.6 million visas had been approved by the government in the year end in March 2022. The rate of successful applications hit 75%, its highest in over 30 years. If you ask me, those coming over the English Channel, for example, breaking our laws to actually get here, breaking the United Kingdom's laws around migration and asylum, they shouldn't be granted bed and board here in Britain. But that's just my view. Is this actually consistent, though, with all of the promises that were made by Her Majesty's government around Brexit? Well, joining me to discuss is the Director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Steve Wolfe, and Migration and Human Rights lawyer, Jackie McKenzie. Jackie, I'm assuming that you vehemently disagree with what I've just said.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion, but it isn't accurate, I'm afraid, because if we look at the data available, say, for 2019, 3.9 million visas were granted, 3.2 million visas were granted. And then we've had 2 years of a pandemic, so effectively not many people were traveling. We've now got this figure of 1.6 million, but if you break those figures down, what you have is about 800,000 visitors. And from those, they're mostly coming from countries that are, doing quite well. So they're coming from China, Nigeria, Brazil, some from Saudi Arabia, India. And these are people who, by the Home Office's own information, do not overstay those tourist visas. They go back. Another 500,000 of them are students, and God knows that our universities need those international students who bring a surplus of income into the country and in most cases go back. So these aren't people coming to use our resources. They can't, in fact, use our resources if they're here as a visitor. They shouldn't be. Of course, we're all going to have an example of somebody who does, but they're not entitled to use them. They're not entitled to housing. Half of the tourists who come just want to see a bit of Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, and this is Jubilee year. The number one destination or the departure destination is actually China and then Japan. So, we've got to look at the figures in terms of the people that you describe as coming across the channel illegally. Firstly, they're not coming across the channel illegally, but they're 30,000, of which 75% of them go on to get asylum. But that 30,000 from a figure of 1.618 million is minuscule. So they're not the issue.
Right,
and the issue in terms of visas granted are holidaymakers. In fact, the group that you might say might impact on services are the less than 3% who come as family members.
OK, Jackie. So, Stephen, then, this isn't an issue, Jackie is saying there. Actually, we're getting this all wrong. And if you ask me, though, 30,000 people coming across the English Channel is 30,000 people too many.
Well, it was 30,000 last year. The estimate so far this year is going to be between 80 to 100,000. We're already running in the first 3 months of the year 3 times as many as we did last year. And when one looks at the cost for each individual asylum applicant that comes across in terms of the channel each year, it's around 40,000 in their first year. So this year, those numbers would be around £4 billion to the UK. Well, Jackie and I will agree in terms of the numbers of the visas coming through. 1.6 million is lower than it was 2 or 3 years ago, but there are big distinctions that I would like to make. The large number, huge number of what we're looking at is over 300,000 in family visas that have been allowed to come in. We've got a 129% increase with 277,000 work-related visas. These aren't people that are just going to go home after 1 or 2 months. But more importantly, when we look at the student figures, yes, there is almost a balance. There's always sometimes when you look at the numbers over the past 10 years, there's actually slightly more students stay in terms of the plus and minus of those going. But the key point that we've got to look at here, why there are big changes, is Boris Johnson changed the rules on students that says that they can stay here for 2 years after their university degree has ended. It means that they can start to look for work, and if they get work, they'll be able to remain. Now, with Boris Johnson saying he wants 600,000 students coming to the UK, we can be guaranteed that those numbers are going to increase, because some of those people are going to say, and I look at the Nigerian study group visas that has just been mentioned, we have had a 529% increase in those granted study visas this year. Is it in relation to those students now saying, look, I've got a great opportunity to stay in the UK for 2 years after my visa is finished, and therefore I'll never be able to be sent home?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen, well, what do you actually make then, just briefly, about the Rwanda Plan? Do you actually think this is going to deliver on the promise made by the government, especially in relation to Brexit, that this country is taking back control of its migration policy and will actually lower the numbers of people coming here?
Well, taking back control of immigration and just looking at in terms of asylum is only a smaller portion of what it meant by taking back control. Do I believe that the Rwandan partnership can actually work? Absolutely. But it won't work immediately. And here is the big problem. whilst the immigration industry is seeking to prevent those people from being sent to Rwanda, and we will see that over the next few weeks with court cases beginning to hit and challenges being made by charities like Care for Cali, for example, that's going to delay this program. And the longer it delays, the more that people will see this as a failure of the government to be able to take back control.
Jackie, what do you make of the Rwanda policy?
Can I just clarify? I didn't say that the Nigerians are high up in the student group. I'm talking about visa groups. And remember, we now have a way of calculating how many people leave the country after they've arrived as a tourist. Why is that data not being published? We happen to know anecdotally, and we get this information from the Migration Observatory at Oxford and from the Centre for Migration at the ONS, that most tourists do go back. But why is this data not published? We really ought to have it. And we also need to know that in these figures, we just spoke about people coming, the family numbers, the 300,000 family members. Remember, a lot of them are dependents on students. There are also people coming as dependents or coming on the Ukraine sponsorship schemes. Remember, there are two schemes, despite all the criticisms of them. Numbers. And there's also, very importantly, the British National Overseas Programme for people from Hong Kong. So you've got to really divide the figures down. You've got to drill down and look at them and look at who's coming. But even if we were to say the workers, there are large numbers of workers coming, but, we've been inviting them. We've been inviting people to work as butchers. We've been inviting people to pick strawberries. We've been inviting healthcare workers. One might argue, why do we need to do that? But we are doing that. It's not their fault that they choose to come and bring their families. On Rwanda, I think Rwanda is a terrible idea because of the numbers. Now, just this week, we learned that there are 100 million people displaced across the globe. 100 million. 26 million of these are refugees. 4.4 million people are seeking asylum as we speak. And we get about 30,000. There is no evidence that the numbers are increasing. In fact, the numbers are down in terms of the channel crossings. It may be that people have been put off. It may be that detection rates are better. Maybe something's going on in France. There is no evidence that 80,000 people are going to cross this year, because there'd be a trajectory that you could already determine. And it's going to, Rwanda may well put people off from coming here. So I don't know where that information is coming from, but it's an unconscionable idea. Rwanda is a problematic country. I don't want to, because even if it was somewhere nice like Grenada or somewhere, we'd still say this is problematic. People are entitled to claim asylum in this country. We get very, very few if you look at the global problem. We have responsibilities in international treaty and international convention. And I don't know why we're shying away from it. It's too small a number.
Just want to let Stephen respond to that.
We're getting millions of people.
Yeah. Stephen, on those 2 points that Jackie's just made, reducing migration, surely we're going to end up with an exacerbated labour shortage in the jobs that Jackie pointed out there. And also, on the Rwanda plan, is there no problem really with the channel crossings whatsoever? These people have got absolutely a right to come here and claim asylum.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to say that there's no one who has a genuine need and falls within international law that says they can come and claim asylum. The issue is that even when you look at the current World Bank statistics, out of those numbers of which Jackie's just talked about, and I've seen it with the IOM numbers too, is that we're now looking about 60% of those people who are claiming asylum are actually work-related. And that's one of the biggest shocks that you see from the international statistics coming out. So even if you look at those numbers, and Jackie, you are wrong there, I'm afraid. I've agreed with much of what you had to say. But the UK's Home Office statistics on immigration statistics that came out this week with a whole raft of data says it's very clear that those coming across on the Channel migrants are at a rate of 3 times faster than they were last year. So if that trajectory carries on, that's going to be around 80,000 people coming. That's the trajectory you're talking about, the 3 times as many. Now, the question that we have to ask is whether a country that now has the highest density in Europe has a huge issue with housing, where we have 250,000 people who were born here living in single-parent accommodation, just as I was when I was younger, who are not able to get a home. We have people in pensions who are struggling with the debts that we've got. The mass immigration that we've got coming into this country costs the UK taxpayer a huge amount. And the government has to make a balance between looking after those people who live in this country already and its international requirements of looking after those elsewhere. We're doing very well on Ukraine. We allowed people to come in from Syria. We had programs from Afghanistan, and we now have programs from Hong Kong. If we continue to do this, we won't be able to afford to take many more in. And certainly when you look at housing, there is just no housing available to house those coming across the channel.
Jackie, briefly, if you would, we're just running at the end of the show.
So can I just ask, how is it Poland's been able to take 2 million people in 1 month? Trinidad and Tobago, that has a population of just over 1 million, has taken almost 400,000 Venezuelans, and they're coping. We are the fourth richest economy in the world. We don't have a problem with 30,000 people. And Simon, you owe me dinner if 80,000 people come this year.
Stephen?
Stephen,
okay.
sorry.
I would love...
Stephen.
Jackie, I'd love to have dinner anyway, just so we could chew the fat over immigration. Let's leave it on at 80,000. But it's very clear when you look at these countries, whether it's those in Pakistan that take huge numbers of Iraqis, if you look at those in Iran that does exactly the same from Afghanistan, they're living in tents. They're not being housed in hotels like they are in the UK. And if you're looking at Poland, you've had a difference where they have been able to provide housing and people are taking them in. It's easier to get them across the border. We have difficulty in housing. We produce 165,000 houses a year. Our hotels are already full. We're spending £5.2 million a day housing those migrants coming across the channel. The question simply most people ask is, where are we going to put them? And we do not have
policy.
housing
We've got
to do
to
it.
get our governments to start delivering social services, housing, education for all. We can
where's the
afford
cost?
it. That is the
How are we
issue.
going to afford it?
Yeah, we're going to have
We've
to
got
end
lots of
it there.
space in this country. Build some houses.
Well, we're going to have to end it there. But I tell you what, though, Jackie, I imagine lots of people watching this show today will be saying, well, where's my house, right? But that was the director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and migration and human rights lawyer, Jackie McKenzie. Plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. Next up, we'll be discussing why are the Tories losing support in the so-called Red Wall. I reckon that last debate might answer some of those questions, but I'll be speaking to an expert. First, though, let's have a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking showery at first, although with showers fading away to leave clear spells. Let's take a look at those details. For Devon and Cornwall, a mixture of showers and sunny spells. The showers will still be on the heavy side at first, but will die away through the evening. For London, the evening is looking largely dry with some sunny spells, although the risk of a few showers remains. For Cardiff and South Wales, a few showers are likely this evening, but for many it will be dry with some sunny spells. It's a similar story across Birmingham and the Midlands, where the evening promises to give a scattering of mainly light showers with variable amounts of cloud and some sunny spells. A cloudier picture across parts of north-east England this evening, with a few spots of rain and some bright or sunny spells. Feeling cool along the east coast with wind off the sea. Rather cloudy at times for Edinburgh and southern Scotland, with a few showery outbreaks, but also with bright or sunny spells. Feeling cool, especially towards the east or under thicker cloud. And for Northern Ireland, the evening will see a familiar mix of sunny spells and a few scattered light showers, perhaps a touch breezy along the north coast. A dry night for most away from Scotland, cloudier in the north and turning chilly in the south under clear skies. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
every morning from 6 o'clock. We'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Jubilee, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Jubilee, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Now, folks, next up, are the Tories in trouble? New YouGov polling claims Boris Johnson would actually lose his seat if an election were held tomorrow. It also shows that the Conservative Party is facing complete annihilation in the so-called Red Wall constituencies that they won back in 2019. And seats like High Wycombe in the south could actually end up going too. So how big is the problem for the Tories? Or is this just normal midterm blues? Let's find out. Joining me is Dr. David Jeffrey, lecturer in British politics at the University of Liverpool. Hiya, David. David, how significant are these latest poll results? Do you reckon Boris Johnson should be, shaken like a leaf in the autumn wind?
I think he should be, really. I mean, the real threat, though, won't come from the polls, because the next election probably won't be for another 2 years. The real threat will come from his own backbenchers, who will see these figures, think, well, this is all because of Partygate, so massively tied up in the Prime Minister's own standing in the country, and think maybe if we get rid of him, we'll claw back a few points in the polls and we'll be able to start afresh. So if I was Boris Johnson, I wouldn't be looking at the polls, I'd be looking at my own backbenchers.
But if we do focus on those polls, what does it tell us about the groups that are actually turning away from the Tories? Is it the Brexiteers who supported them, obviously, in overwhelming numbers in 2019 to get Brexit done, to coin a phrase?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is at the moment, it's pretty much everyone is turning away from the Conservatives. So this isn't a specific group that you can throw some kind of specific policies at to win them back. This is a loss of trust in Boris Johnson himself from people who gave him the benefit of the doubt in 2019. So really, this isn't something that you can fix with maybe saying a tax break here or extra spending there. This is something that people are seeing in the leaders themselves, right? And these are people who voted across the Red Wall, in fact, across the country in many cases, voted for Boris because they liked the way he did politics. They believed him. It's always a bit of a myth that he had excellent kind of personal ratings, but now he's broken that trust with the people, it's going to be very, very difficult for him to win that back and to win people back round.
So why do you think that trust is gone then? Is it exclusively around, do people really care about the so-called Partygate and those issues? Or is it tax hikes? Is it inaction, perceived inaction on cost of living? What actually is it that's cutting through?
I think it is Partygate. I mean, I think the government could easily spin the national insurance increase, well, as they did, saying, we want to put more money into public services, and that's an argument you can make. Inaction over cost of living, that is a problem, but it's not really explaining this long-term decline in the Conservative vote that we've seen. And it all started with Owen Paterson, and when Boris Johnson tried to essentially rewrite the rules to save his friend for some unknown reason. And then it was just compounded with Partygate, which even though people think, or many people thought the rules were a bit draconian, they felt like they followed it, and they think that it's essentially the elite laughing at them while they follow the rules, while they're all having suitcases full of wine. So you can't kind of base your own political appeal on sticking it to the European elites or to the Remainer elites, and then when in office, act as if you're above the law.
So, David, though, is this not normal? You're an expert on Thatcher's time in office, right? You know very well that before 1983, she wasn't actually doing very well in the polls, right? She was having some serious midterm blues. Then, of course, the Falklands War came across. Do you think Boris Johnson can actually turn the ship around? Can he actually capitalise on the fact that he's had to deal, of course, with the war in Europe? And, of course, as you mentioned, we're coming out of the pandemic. We're out of that now. The economy's not in great shape, but you cannot really blame that exclusively on Boris Johnson. Or are Labour guaranteed almost to actually do very well come the next election?
Oh, it's not guaranteed in any way, right? So, like you say, governments often suffer setbacks in midterms. That's completely normal. I think the thing that makes me a little bit more concerned about the Conservatives now is that the damage done to Boris Johnson's own ratings is so great that won't dissipate. Now, that's not to say the Conservatives can't turn it round. They could have a very popular manifesto. Labour could make a series of mistakes. The boundary reforms will help the Conservatives in some ways by the way that the seats are being redistributed. So there are a few ways that the Conservatives could come back. But at the moment, the picture does look very bleak. And it would be very difficult, I think, for the current government to do so. And if I was a Conservative backbencher, it might look like changing leader might be the easiest way out of this rut.
Well, we'll see, won't we? We'll see. I mean, all I can say, though, David, is, one or two Stella Creasy's coming out and saying women can have penises, and then the Labour Party starts to look very silly indeed. But Dr. David Jeffrey, lecturer in British politics at the University of Liverpool, thank you very much for your time. Now, folks, you're with GB News on telly and DAB radio. Next, we're going to be discussing the booming price of used cars. What's going on and how much could your motor potentially be worth? But first, it's time for a check on those news headlines.
It's 3:31. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. The government is investigating what UK police say was the worst violence seen at a European football match. Sports Minister Nigel Huddleston says clashes between football fans and French police at the Champions League final last night are concerning and upsetting. Liverpool defender Andy Robertson has also criticised the police handling of the event. The Reds lost 1-0 to Real Madrid at the Stade de France. Earlier bulletins on GB News were showing incorrect pictures for this story, for which we would like to apologise. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defence says the Royal Air Force and the Navy will be protecting fans at the Qatar World Cup. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says British personnel will join forces with their Qatari counterparts to tackle terrorism and other threats to the tournament. The FIFA World Cup in the country is due to start on November the 21st. President Joe Biden and his wife Jill are in Texas today to pay their respects to the families of those killed in Tuesday's mass school shooting. 19 children and 2 teachers were murdered by a gunman at Robb Elementary in the town of Uvalde. It's the 3rd mass shooting in the US in the last few weeks. President Vladimir Zelensky visited troops on the front lines in the northeast of the country today. The visit marks his first official appearance outside of the Kyiv region since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February. Ukraine's military say their forces are continuing to resist Russia's assault in the east of the country. Officials say Severodonetsk, the largest country they still hold in the Donbass, was weathering heavy artillery barrages today. And tributes are pouring in for legendary jockey Lester Pigott, who's died aged 86. The 11-time champion and winner of 30 classics was widely regarded as one of the greatest riders of all time. Fellow jockey Frankie Dettori says Lester was a hero of his and the impact he made in racing is second to none. The chief executive of Great British Racing, Rod Street, adds, Lester was a true titan of sport who transcended horse racing. TV, online and GAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Dan will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Now, folks, the used car market is in complete and utter turmoil, with a surge in prices and some pre-owned vehicles now more expensive than new ones. This is leading to an increase in theft. So what on earth is going on? Joining me to discuss is Jim Holder, editorial director at What Car. Now, Jim, what on earth is going on here with this shortage? How long do you reckon it's going to last if I ask you to be my Mystic Meg for the day?
The Mystic Meg question is one we'd all like to know the answer to. So what we have is a dual situation here. We have high demand for used vehicles, and that really started soaring after the very first lockdown, if you can remember that far back, but has kept on going. But we also have a shortage of new car supply. Because of the shortage of computer chips to build more new cars. So there aren't enough new cars to go around. A lot of people are moving into the used car market. There are other various factors impacting around there. And of course, that has forced up demand on used cars when supply is lower than perhaps traditional, forcing up these prices. Now, what we've seen probably for 18 months is rises typically between 10 and 20% in some of the used car values. But as you say, even forcing some nearly new cars to be more valuable than completely new cars, which is slightly insane. But we are starting to see a slight softening, just a couple of percentage points coming off the used car values over the last couple of months. So we might see it stabilising a little bit. I can't foresee a crash, I'm afraid, if you're in the market ready to buy one. I can't see it collapsing because the same issues still apply. But I feel it probably got a little bit too hot, the market, and some of that heat is starting to come out now.
So, Jim, how worried then should my viewers be watching this thinking, goodness gracious me, the fear of someone nicking me car, for example, right? Because there is a lot of crime of that nature going on right now, isn't there?
Yeah, we're hearing all sorts of issues here. We're hearing of cars being stolen, particularly keyless cars where they use, it's called a relay theft, where they come up to your house. They don't even need to have the key to steal some of these more modern vehicles. But we're also hearing a lot about parts of cars being stolen, particularly catalytic converters, particularly from hybrid vehicles, which contain cleaner raw materials inside them, precious metals, such as platinum, rhodium and palladium. So the values of these catalytic converters have gone through the roof, as well as the values of the cars. So, that part alone can be stolen in a minute by a gang, probably worth between £500 and £1,000 from the right car. So there's a quick income in the current climate. And yes, you're absolutely right. Entire vehicles also being stolen. And again, some of the more modern systems that we've put onto our vehicles, actually making them easier to steal. The thieves are very much ahead of the curve here and making the most of it.
Yeah, and Jim, just finally there, young people are going to have to wait until next year, the Telegraph are saying, to book a driving test because of the impact of lockdowns, which you say in turn as well has hiked up the price of certain motors. This is another cost of lockdown, isn't it? So that we're going to see young people having to wait quite a long time, and perhaps, Jim, they might have passed their provisional, their theory, but they're going to have to do it again because they're not able to get a test in time.
Yeah, there's a real risk of those theory tests timing out. There are various apps now that a lot of young drivers are using to try and get into these queues for their driving tests, but there is a huge backlog that they've been trying to work their way through. And really, it is going to take a long time to clear that. So I think anyone looking to learn to drive or to take their test needs to plan a huge distance ahead at the moment. And you're right, when they do pass, the cost of mobility is rising. It feels a one-way rise. The cost of living that we're all experiencing, the energy costs and so on, they're going to be passed on through the price of buying cars, new and used. We're moving towards electrification. There is a cost of the research and development of that will be passed on to the consumer. So we have to understand, we see personal mobility as crucial to our modern day lives, and it's powered the sort of industrial revolution and the economic revolution that we've all enjoyed. But undoubtedly, this is one area of life that is going to get more expensive.
Yeah, Jim, what do you think the future is for British manufacturing as far as cars are concerned as well? I know I said that was my last question, but I lied to you. Because there are a lot of reports suggesting that Jaguar Land Rover, for example, are looking to other countries in Europe. Do you think people in Sunderland, as far as Nissan's concerned, should be fearful as well? What's going on as far as manufacturing of these the motors are concerned?
Yeah, there's a fundamental issue here, and that is under the rules of trading that we are part of, we have to start manufacturing batteries for vehicles in the UK if we're going to assemble complete cars in the UK. And the UK is a long, long way behind Europe in investing in these battery plants. They are multi-billion-pound investments that need to be made. They take years to ramp up, and we are well behind that curve. We have long had a very proud car manufacturing industry in the UK. Almost 1 million jobs around the car industry today in the UK. That can collapse overnight. We know we're switching to electric vehicles for new car sales from 2030 and then on to 2035. If we don't make the investment, we won't have the jobs and we won't have the factories that are able to build the cars under the rules of trade that we have signed up to.
Yeah, but Jim, surely you agree with me, right, that it's a bit Panglossian, right? It's utopian almost for the government to assume that it's going to be able to get enough charging facilities, charging points for all of these cars to actually prohibit the sale of petrol and diesel ones and go exclusively electric from 2030. It surely is a little bit too rose-tinted glasses, isn't it?
I think we're walking a tightrope. I think what you say is very true. There are real risks here, and I think the risks heighten with every crisis, whether it's a cost of living crisis or a war in Ukraine crisis, because the raw materials that Russia and Ukraine control to a large degree are critical to manufacturing electric cars. So yes, we're walking a tightrope, but I have to say there is a huge amount of private money ready to be invested in the charging infrastructure. I think we're in for a rough few months and possibly even years as that money is spent and the charging infrastructure goes in. And I think perhaps if you live in some of the wilder parts of the UK, or if you will live in a flat, there are real issues that need to be overcome to get access for everybody, which you rightly identify. But there are solutions. But I agree, the money needs to be spent, the infrastructure needs to be put in, not tomorrow, but really today.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, won't we, Jim? But Jim, thank you very much for your expert analysis. That was Jim Holder, Editorial Director at What Car. Now, folks, time for another Grime Watch, a part of the show where we actually look at what you at home have been saying about the biggest stories of the week. Much more important than my big gob. We're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, right? Energy bills, as you all well know, have increased to a record high due to a spike in wholesale gas prices. People are struggling to heat their homes, but the government is refusing to drop green tax levies. I tell you what, the amount of hot air coming from the government could power most of our homes, couldn't it? They actually add another 25% to our bills, these levies, these green taxes. So I asked you at home, right, why don't we just drop these costly green levies? Ron had this to say. He says, many have been saying this for years. However, dropping the green taxes would also mean recognising the net zero lunacy is the root of the problem. Well, Ron, I couldn't agree with you more, because I really, really do fear that in the years to come, this is going to look like we had happy days, halcyon days during this gas crisis, because the problems, I think, are going to get increasingly worse. We've just been discussing with Jim there how we don't have all of these electric car charging facilities. Despite that, we're banning petrol and diesel cars. It doesn't make sense. Paul says they won't drop the green taxes because they've no intention of ending the green lunacy. The Conservative Party are no longer conservative. That's been a key theme, hasn't it, of our show today over the past 2 hours, discussing whether or not the Conservative Party remembers what it's all about. Jack had this to say. He says, because it's not about saving the planet, it's about controlling the population. Well, this is what gets me, right? The likes of Sir David Attenborough, he's lauded as being this hero of the environment, but he does actually say that we need to almost cull the human population. If you ask me, that's a pretty scary thing to be advocating. John added, stop talking common sense. Some people don't understand it. Well, John, there you are. I think that's the perfect way to end Grime Watch, isn't it? You can't beat that. Now, Britain's half-term getaways have been blighted by chaos at airports. The carrier EasyJet have cancelled more than 200 flights over the next 10 days. There's also overcrowding and traffic on the roads. So hopefully you've got me on the box. What can you do, though, to avoid the trouble? With me now is the travel journalist and broadcaster, Simon Colter, I'm delighted to say. Simon, thank you very much for your time. Tell us about EasyJet cancelling these 200 flights over 10 days. People must be absolutely livid.
They are, and I'm afraid it's getting worse. Let me tell you exactly what's been happening. So, over the past few weeks, we've seen the Britain's biggest low-cost airline, that's EasyJet, having all manner of problems. The main one is actually a chronic shortage of resources. However, they've also had some bad weather, and they had an IT failure on Thursday, which caused cancellation of 200 flights on that day alone. But the main problem has been that every single day for weeks, they've been making loads of ad hoc, short notice cancellations. And typically what happens is you go to bed, you check your flight, it's all fine. You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get your 7 o'clock flight, and you've got a message saying your flight's been cancelled. This is so stressful, so upsetting. wrecking thousands of people's holidays. And so what they are trying to do is say, we're going to cancel all these flights, 240 of them, which I calculate could affect 40,000 passengers, all of whom have booked those flights in good faith. But they are now, the idea is you cancel people's holidays now, that will mean that they at least have some warning and they can do something about it. And of course, well, we can get onto air passenger rights, but everybody has the right to be booked on another flight, even if it's another airline, at EasyJet's expense. Yeah. However, these haven't been enough. And so we've seen an awful lot of on-the-day cancellations today, mainly to and from Gatwick. For instance, the Naples flight was cancelled first thing this morning. I've heard other people heading for Ibiza. And we're also seeing some domestic cancellations, say, between Bristol and Edinburgh. So it's an almighty mess.
Simon, is this problem isolated to Britain? Because if you consider Heathrow, for example, right, we like to consider ourselves to be an international hub for travel. Do you think that reputation is at risk? Because there seem to be one or two cock-ups going on here.
I think that's the exactly right technical phrase to use. Yeah, we are in the embarrassing position of having gone into the COVID crisis with absolutely the best, the strongest, the biggest aviation industry in Europe. Much of that was closed down because of the very severe COVID restrictions, and now we can't start up again. Now, you mentioned Heathrow, and actually British Airways is cancelling an average 120 flights a day, but they are doing it in a kind of gentle way. They're basically cancelling a few weeks ahead. They're giving people plenty of warning. They're also not selling new tickets on those flights, and so therefore there's a huge loss of connectivity, about 20,000 seats a day that aren't going in and out of Heathrow. But on the other hand, people are not getting these sudden shocks. It's not restricted to EasyJet and BA, by the way. I'm seeing big problems, particularly with airport handling in Bristol today. Lots of Jet2 flights delayed. TUI has been having a horrible time, or rather, its passengers have been having a horrible time with loads of really heavily delayed flights and cancellations. But if you look abroad, Amsterdam Schiphol, so bad are things there that actually KLM stopped selling flights from Amsterdam for this weekend. Wow. You can fly through Amsterdam, you can fly to Amsterdam, but they have seen so many of their passengers missing flights because the security queues are so long. They just said, we're not going to do it.
Incredible. I wouldn't like to be flying this weekend, to tell you that for free. But Simon, just briefly, if you would, what can consumers do? What are their rights? What are their protections under current laws to actually, what can they do essentially to get their money back?
Right, well, there's no problem about getting your money back, but actually what most people want is they need to have their holiday. And luckily, the law is on their side. You go to EasyJet, they have to book you a flight, or at least pay for a flight. You can book it yourself on British Airways, on Jet2, on Ryanair, on Wizz Air, whoever's flying your way. They also need to pay you compensation between £220 and £350, depending on the length of the flight. And while you're waiting to get to your destination, they'll also be paying your hotel accommodation and your meals. So you've got rights on your side, but frankly, people just want a holiday. And my view is very strongly that the government has to step in, talk frankly to the airlines, the airports, say, how many flights can you handle this summer? Don't sell any more than that, and indeed probably start cancelling some so that people at least have a chance to sort themselves out and don't get sudden shocks.
Well, if Transport Secretary Grant Shapps is watching, Simon, I've no doubt he's quaking in his boots because Simon Colter, the travel journalist, is after him. Simon, thank you very much for your time today. Now, folks, it's the Queen's Platinum Jubilee next week, and the nation is getting ready. More than 16,000 street parties are expected to be thrown over the bank holiday weekend. Emily Thornberry might have a fit at the number of flags. Here at GB News and on my show next week, we'll actually be celebrating and covering all of the major events. In particular, the Royal Platinum Pageant will be during my show on Sunday, so do watch, kicking off at 2:30 p.m. I hope you'll be here with me. Joining me to discuss is the royal broadcaster and commentator, Rafe Heidel-Mankiw. Rafe, thank you very much for your time today. Talk me through, briefly if you would, what are the events that we can look forward to over the weekend?
So, yes, Darren. Well, look, after months of speculation, discussion, and anticipation, yes, you're right. It's finally here. We're in the final countdown to the Platinum Jubilee. And really, you know, whether it's parades or pageants, parties or concerts, there's something for everybody to enjoy on this special extended 4-day bank holiday weekend coming up. A lovely gift from the Queen as we celebrate her 70-year reign. It starts on Thursday with Trooping the Colour, which is the Queen's annual birthday celebration that's been brought forward to this weekend. Now, if you are lucky enough to have children in and around the London area, or you want to come to London, I would say do make every effort to come to the Mall, because that's where you're going to have the most iconic image of the weekend of the Queen and the royal family on that balcony with a 6-minute extended Royal Air Force flypast, an amazing sight with Battle of Britain planes, the Red Arrows, with their red, white and blue. And it's something for the kids of today to tell their grandchildren. When I was a kid, I once met somebody who had seen Queen Victoria, and hopefully the children of today will be able to tell that story to their grandchildren too. And then, of course, as you say, there's going to be a big pageant, which will look at every decade of the Queen's reign, and you'll have everybody from Sir Cliff Richard to Dame Shirley Bassey and some more recent and younger artists too performing there. And of course there'll be the big party at the Palace, headlined by Diana Ross, with performances by Elton John and numerous other luminaries. And of course, not forgetting either that there will be across this country, as you said, thousands of parties, far more than 16,000, I should point out. 16,000 is the number of street closures that will take place. But Buckingham Palace have confirmed that 60,000 applications have been made across the country. Some estimates say that 15% of the nation will be celebrating this Jubilee, with about a quarter of us watching on TV, and 1 in 5, 20%, saying that they're going to raise a glass at some point this weekend to Her Majesty.
Absolutely fantastic. At those Trooping the Colour rehearsals we saw yesterday, Rafe, the Duke of Cambridge actually stood up, didn't he? Stood up to the plate. I imagine his grandmother watching that would have been incredibly proud.
That's right. So for the 2 weekends prior to the Trooping of the Colour, there's always a rehearsal. And so Prince William was there in his capacity as Colonel of the Irish Guards. Now, we're going to have a break with tradition on this Thursday for the Trooping of the Colour. The Queen has attended every single trooping, except for 1955, when there was a British rail strike. And this would have been the first one that she actually missed. And so with a break with tradition, she won't be there. She'll be on the Palace of Buckingham, on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, to take the salute there.
Rafe,
so
we're going to have to end it there, sadly.
Will be in Horse Guards Parade, but they'll then go on to the Palace.
Brilliant. And you'll be back on GB News next weekend to celebrate with us. That was the royal broadcaster and commentator Rafe Heidelman-Q. Folks, you've been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. This show is on every Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. But for now, let's find out what the weather's like.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking showery at first, although with showers fading away to leave clear spells. Let's take a look at those details. For Devon and Cornwall, a mixture of showers and sunny spells. The showers will still be on the heavy side at first, but will die away through the evening. For London, the evening is looking largely dry with some sunny spells, although the risk of a few showers remains. For Cardiff and South Wales, a few showers are likely this evening, but for many it will be dry with some sunny spells. It's a similar story across Birmingham and the Midlands, where the evening promises to give a scattering of mainly light showers with variable amounts of cloud and some sunny spells. A cloudier picture across parts of north-east England this evening, with a few spots of rain and some bright or sunny spells. Feeling cool along the east coast with wind off the sea. Rather cloudy at times for Edinburgh and southern Scotland, with a few showery outbreaks, but also with bright or sunny spells. Feeling cool, especially towards the east or under thicker cloud. And for Northern Ireland, the evening will see a familiar mix of sunny spells and a few scattered light showers, perhaps a touch breezy along the north coast. A dry night for most away from Scotland, cloudier in the north and turning chilly in the south under clear skies. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart. And I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alistair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.